Within the storied halls of British aviation history, perhaps the single most famous jet aircraft to ever fly is the Harrier jump jet. First flying in the late 1960s and serving with both the RAF and Royal Navy well into the 21st century, the Harrier was an enduring symbol of British air power during the Cold War, and variants remain in service with America, Italy and Spain to this day. The Sea Harrier is a specialised naval variant of the plane, using the craft's famous VTOL ability to take off from the short carriers the UK preferred. More multi-role than their primarily strike-oriented brethren, the Sea Harriers would go on to play a pivotal role in the Falklands War, where they and their AIM-9 Sidewinder missiles won out air superiority over the outnumbering Argentine aircraft, cementing its place in the hearts and minds of the British public. We begin in the cockpit, removing and cleaning the various parts before painting them all in using both my airbrush and paint brushes. Once the parts had dried, I glued the cockpit together and applied the instrument panel decals before setting the parts to one side. The next section to do was the lift fan assembly. I spray all the parts in the various colours they needed to be before assembling it all and putting it to one side. I also painted in the side panels, though this would have been easier to paint with a brush after the main colours were down.
Now I could assemble the majority of the remaining parts. Like with most of my builds, I left off the landing gear and missile pylons for now, both to give me easier access to the bays and as it would make them easier to paint separately. Once all the parts were glued together, I leave it overnight to make sure it's fully dry. When all the parts were built, I spray a layer of primer across the whole model. This provides a base for the paint as well as making it easier for me to see any gaps. I fill these gaps with acrylic putty, allowed it to dry for one full day and then sanded it flush. I then spray more primer onto these areas and leave it to fully cure.
I could now paint the colour in. The scheme I'd chosen was simple, with just a layer of extra dark sea grey over the whole plane. Once this dried, I painted in some details with my paintbrush, such as a gear bays and a black stripe on the tail. After all this was done, the char gets a coat of gloss varnish to seal things in and prepare them for the decals.
Next, I applied decals. I cut them from the paper and softened them in warm water before transferring them to the model. Once applied, I gave them a coat of decal softening solution to make them copy the underlying details, and then once dry, sealed the result in with another layer of gloss varnish. I gave the plane an all-over oil wash, allowing it to run into the recesses with capillary action. This was allowed to dry for several hours, then cleaned with some sponges dipped in thinner. Once done, I left it to dry for a further full 48 hours. I then had to do a bit of sculpting. The angle of attack probe included in the kit was completely the wrong size and shape, and looked nothing like the photo references. As such, I decided to try sculpt my own, using milliput and some craft wire, shaping it on the nose of the plane to ensure the sizing was right before removing it for drying. I then leave it to cure for 1 day. I now paint all the remaining parts, excluding the missiles. Once painted, I glue them onto the model and then spray a layer of matte varnish to serve as a base for the next step. I now do some weathering on the plane. Like with the fairy swordfish I did a few videos ago, I wanted to add the impression of salt buildup on the wings. As such, I paint some white oil paint onto the surface after wetting it with some thinner, before blending it in with a flat brush. I then leave it to dry and work on the final details. All that was left was painting the missiles in the cockpit. I did the missiles first, spraying in the colour before painting in the other details with my brush. I then mask and spray the canopy, glue all the parts on, give the plane one final coat of varnish, and the model is done.